Why was I going to the George Washington Bridge? Because it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. We can wrap this video here. I don't have to keep talking. Hey, also, hey everybody, Adam Savage in my cave. And today we're talking about bikes. I've got a whole bunch of videos I'm starting and then I'm going back and forth between. I'm still not done with collets. I don't know when these are going to get released. So to talk about my origin story, as an engineer, because it had all sorts of different germinations. But one of the key germinations was, so I grew up in the days of BMX coaster bikes, right? Everyone had the banana seats. I had an idealized bike that someone stole from me. It still sits in my head. It's all black with a banana seat and big old ape hanger bars. I loved that thing. And, me and my compadres rode those all over the neighborhoods of, Tarrytown, Sleepy Hollow, New York. And then when I was I think I was 11 or 12, my parents got a 10-speed from a friend of theirs, the Goldmans. The Goldmans lent us a 10-speed. My parents were like, this would be great. We can give Adam the 10-speed. And so we got out in front of our house on Millard Avenue there in Tarrytown, which is a slight downslope. And I knew how to ride a bicycle, right? So they put me on the bicycle and they're like, you can start to pedal. And I start to pedal. And then I go to brake. But because it's a 10-speed, my feet are just whoa! And I'm like, what's going on? And they're yelling, squeeze the handlebars. And I'm squeezing really hard on the handlebars and I don't know what they mean. Eventually, my dad caught up with me. I did not get into 10-speed bikes at that point. A few years later, when I was 12, a couple years later, I'm 12, 13, my sister Chris leaves her Paris Sport bicycle at the house while she goes off to college. And I just said I could ride it. I would ride it, and then I get a flat tire because this is those thin tires. I would take it to the bicycle store, Sleepy Hollow Bicycle. Another tangent, a very germinational film in my family is Breaking Away. A truly great movie, early Dennis Quaid, Daniel Stern. And there's an old racist dad in that film played by an old friend of my dad's and is a comedy improv genius named Paul Dooley. Breaking Away is about this American in the 70s obsessed with Parisian cyclists or Italian cyclists. That's it. And he pretends he's Italian and he's always talking in Italian to everybody. And we now live in the age of modern coffee shops. If you go into a coffee shop at 5:30, 6 a.m., you're going to see the cyclists who are there to carb up before their rides. And, I'm not making fun of you cyclists, but you're hilarious walking around in those wooden soles like gazelles with the giant calves. I love the whole vibe. And that vibe was wholly extant in Sleepy Hollow, New York in the 70s with the twin brothers that worked at this store and also competitively rode. And they were just never not in bicycle slicks, like spandex. And this is the 70s, man. And after the third time I brought in a flat, they were like, don't go away. Stay here and watch us do this flat, and then you can do it. And this was a perfect example of teach a man to fish. And I cut my early engineering teeth on fixing, modding, putting together, and riding primarily bicycles because I lived in Manhattan from 1985 to 1990. I lived in Manhattan and Brooklyn, and my primary mode of transportation was not the subway. It was my bicycle. Winter, summer, I rode, on average, I ended up figuring out somewhere between 5 and 10 miles a day for 5 years. In Manhattan streets, man, I love that rush. I love that rush. Recently, I came across a video of a cyclist bombing down through Manhattan at this full traffic clip. And I don't think I could do that anymore, but boy, do I remember the feeling. I remember the feeling of being in Manhattan traffic, spotting problematic drivers 6, 7 cars ahead. You knew where the vibe was. And some of the earliest moments of me feeling super physically alive were on bicycles riding around Manhattan. I remember specifically one day I was dating this young Russian woman, and I left her house at 7 p.m. and it was a hot New York summer. So it's like 85 degrees, but it was also raining. And the minute I left her house, it started raining. And like 85-degree rain, it's like, it's hard to even get like pissy about it. And I just gave over to it. And I'm in this like torrential cats and dogs movie set kind of downpour. It's just a shower. Like within a minute, I'm wetter than I'll ever get. And I've got another 50 blocks to go. And so I just did. And it was a really, really joyful ride. I remember getting to the house and no one was there. And I was like, who can I share this seminal memory with? Anyway, bicycles, very, very, very important to me. So, you know, I had that Parasport ended up getting stolen from me. And that's when my parents were like, you know, we have house insurance for stuff that gets stolen because like some kids broke into the backyard of our house and stole that Parasport. And so I was like, really? And they were like, yeah, you can fill out a form and maybe we'll get paid back for it. So I filled out a form of what that Parasport would cost. And we got like an insurance settlement that allowed me to go back to Sleepy Hollow Bicycle and buy a really, really beautiful Italian Motobacan bicycle. I think that thing weighed, I know today bicycles that weigh like 18 pounds sounds like super heavy. Back in those days, that was really light. And I think this Motobacan was like 16 pounds. It was feather light to me. And I rode that for a few years in Manhattan. That was the first bike I rode in Manhattan on a daily. And then I was working for this great, amazing graphic design firm. I know, I'm so sorry that you get so much preamble, but it's all part of the narrative here. I was working for this phenomenal design firm. These 5 women I worked with were amazing. And I was like commuting from Park Slope, Brooklyn to work out in Midtown every day and I mean, like at that point I was so, you know, you're like 23, 22, your body's fully made of plastic, right? It's just like, it takes everything you throw at it. I was like so joyfully bicyclically oriented that I would like on my lunch break, I would just ride from 5th Avenue and 23rd Street to the Battery and back just to like move. Yeah, yeah. So I was working at this design firm and I was actually making good money. They were paying me really good money. And I took a paycheck. I took a whole paycheck and I went to the bicycle store. I went specifically to a bicycle store over on 9th Avenue in Hell's Kitchen. And I bought this, not this exact bike, but I bought effectively this bike. This is a Cannondale SR500. It's sort of their prosumer. It's like, there's a better model that was a lot more, but this was like their standard road bike that was super light, skinny tires, but a heavy frame. And Cannondale was one of the earliest to have, I believe, production aluminum frames and this fat bar. That's what I remember is this fat bar and this great color. I mean, if this color doesn't say 80s, I don't know what color does. So this was sold on Leavenworth, from Bicycle Specialties, Leavenworth, on 4682 Leavenworth. Wonder how long ago that was. So I went and spent a whole paycheck that I had gotten from Teresa Design that I was working for, and I spent it on a bicycle. It was like $750, which was, yeah, that's a lot of 1987 money. And I loved that bike. That bike took me on so many adventures, riding all through the 5 boroughs, doing the 5-borough bike race and Central Park in the middle of the night. And just like, when you're young and it doesn't feel like anything to be able to like jump on a bicycle and ride 25 miles, it's like a city like Manhattan is just the most incredible playground because there's so much to explore. You'll never get to the end of any of it, right? So I have the deepest and fondest memories of specifically this bike frame. What happened to it? I'm glad you asked. The end of my association with this bike frame happened towards the end of my time in New York. It was spring of 1990, and I was working at the design firm. I was working at this graphic design firm, but more piecemeal. And I was stopping by literally to pick up a paycheck. And I locked my bike up with a kryptonite bar lock on 24th Street and 5th Avenue, right there by the Flatiron Building. And I went upstairs and I came back down 5 minutes later. and there was 3 pieces of a kryptonite lock, and no bicycle. It was really sad. I called up Kryptonite because I thought that it was insured. And they are, but not on the island of Manhattan. They were like, okay, yeah, what's the address of the theft? And I was like, 103rd Street, Manhattan. They're like, oh, yeah, sorry, no, we do not. None of our guarantees are for the island of Manhattan. Things are too hairy over there. So it was just a full loss. And I had to not have that bicycle anymore. But it was like I said, deeply fond memories of this. And I was another tangent. My friend Tom Crenshaw had a bicycle store out in Walnut Creek called Frame Up Bikes. And he is a deep bicycle enthusiast. Just knowing Tom has gotten me back into my bike nostalgia. That's it. That's just knowing him has got me back into my bike nostalgia. So I went online and I looked up how much can you get a SR500 for, and I picked up this frame for like $120. But I'm gonna turn this into I'm not gonna make it a multi-speed bike. I'm gonna make it a single-speed coaster. I'm gonna take all the stuff off of it, and I'm gonna get rid of this paint job. I want to make it raw aluminum. Yeah, I'm gonna make this a very, very, very bare bones bike. Because while the color has nostalgia for me, I want this to be something even special. Okay, so as you see, I have painted the frame with 2K. That is a 2-part. 2K is a 2-part paint. When your automobile gets painted, they mix 2 parts together, a catalyst and a paint medium, and it allows it to get extra hard. It's like a similar chemical reactions to what bring us modern plastics. But I have painted this. Look, aluminum doesn't necessarily need a clear coat, but it does tarnish and it does anodize, and I can slow that process down, and I can get the forks, which are steel, to match the aluminum better. But look, it took 3 tries, 3 different passes with the paint stripper. But I'm really happy. It's a very pretty frame. It'll be really nice when I have it all set up on some road wheels and a little, not a fixie, a coaster. That is the coaster. That will be the front wheel, but not the front tire. Let's see here. What do we got? What do we got for Christmas? Let's see. Here. Another. Oh. This is lovely. I am really pleased. I'm gonna have to put rivets in some of these holes to fill them in, but the 2K paint job, I did 2 full coats. It's really nice. It's pretty darn even. Looks like I knew what I was. Maybe looks like I knew what I was doing. Let's not. Yeah, go too far here. But let's. I feel like I can start to attach some things to this. So I was putting the tire on, and it banged into the little bit of up tube that came through this fork. And that probably means that I've got the wrong size wheel by a small amount. But that extra bit sticking through was not necessary for the structural needs of this member. So I took it out because it doesn't matter. Yeah. Let's see if that gets me where I want to go. Well, I just rode it around San Francisco, and I'm really, really happy. Look, it's not a show bike. It's not a show piece. It's an everyday carry bike. It's throw it in the garage and use it for Aaron's bike. It is. What's hilarious is it's like 20 pounds and 25 pounds probably. Maybe even a little more than that. I remember that feeling really light when I was in New York in the 80s, and how heavy that feels compared to the carbon fiber I've got at home. But this one is filled with a deep nostalgia, and I'm really happy how this frame came out. All those beautiful skookum welds on Cannondales from the 80s, man. There is a small possibility I may revisit this for a couple of reasons. I may end up putting a silver crank on here instead of this black crank. That's one thing that might happen. But yeah, I couldn't be more pleased with this. Thank you guys for joining me. Oh, also, I told the story at the beginning about bikes being kind of my origin story for engineering. And the thing I love about bicycles is the feedback is direct. The machines are mechanically relatively simple. They have gotten much more complex. But they are a great threshold to entry for learning about engineering. And there are few things more satisfying than putting together your own ride and riding it. And local legendary decades-old makerspace in the Bay Area, the Crucible over in Oakland, California, has a community bike program. If you're in the community, you can go over there and they will teach you how to put together a bike, and that bike becomes your bike. That is the kind of program I'm here for. And while I was profligate in the assembly of all the parts for my nostalgia bike, everything that is extra here goes to the Crucible's bike program. Every last bit of handlebar tape and other stuff. So it goes to a good home. Yeah, I may make personal mods to this, but this is where we're at. I'm really pleased. And just, the tenacity of the paint job taking three passes. There is all right, I'm just going to say one more aesthetic thing about the bicycle. There is a look that I was really kind of going for. And it's a look I can almost pull off. In the New York in the New York of the 1980s, the big thing was fixies. That was when they first showed up. And the messengers that rode these fixies. A fixie is not what I have built. I've built a coaster. A fixie is a one-to-one. The chain locks your crank to that back wheel. So stopping and starting is all done with your legs. Not my jam. However, those bikes, I don't know, fixies always seem to be ridden by these 6.5 foot tall ectomorphs. And this is the first frame I bought. It's a much bigger frame than this one. This is, I think, a 58 centimeter. This is like I think I'm getting these numbers kind of, not sure if I'm getting these numbers right. But basically, this frame is bigger than that because of this. Now, that may mean that it's actually too big for me to ride, but I do have abnormally long legs. So I may get up my energy and eventually strip this as well. And I may reassemble this bike with a taller frame because it's kind of like the fixie look of the 80s that I wanted. Now, this isn't to say there'll be another video in the future. It's plausible that all happens off camera, but I wanted you to know what I was thinking. Cannondale, you make a beautiful frame. This really was sort of like an amazing bike for me to get to know in New York, and I rode it hard. At one point, in order to meet my parents for a thing I had forgotten about, this is a true story, and I really did make this time. I made it from 8th Avenue and Carroll Street in Park Slope, Brooklyn. 8th Avenue and Carroll Street. I made it from there to the George Washington Bridge. That's 168th Street and Broadway. I made it that distance in 51 minutes. That was one of my best rides under duress in order to get to a place that I had no money. I didn't even have $1 for the subway. It was ridiculous. It was such a late teens, early 20s kind of moment. But it was one of my best rides. Park Slope. Why was I going to the George Washington Bridge? Because it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. We can wrap this video here. I don't have to keep talking. Thanks everyone for joining me for this. Hey, also, I knew I was forgetting something. Local legendary bike shop, Valencia Cyclery, which is only a few blocks from my humble shop here, has provided marvelous support during the build of this bike. I've bought many of my last minute parts there, and they're all excited. They want me to bring it by when I'm done so I can show it to them, and I totally will. Thanks, Valencia Cyclery. Thanks, the Mission District, my favorite neighborhood in San Francisco, my personal neighborhood. Yeah, I think that's enough. We've wrapped a build today. Thanks so much for joining me. You guys have a great day.